Thank you for joining us online. We have Joseph Anderson. Is there anybody else online?
That's it.
Okay, before we start, let's go ahead and do some introductions. You can all see who we are, our names, but Dallin, if you want to start, let's just make sure everybody knows who's here.
So I'm Dallin Woodrow with Cache County Fire Warden. So I work for Utah Forestry Fire and State Lands, but in conjunction with Cache County Fire. So
Okay,
Tracy Swenson, I am the area manager for Forestry Fire and State Lands for the Bear River area, which covers 4 counties and Cache. And then I'd also ask, I don't know that Joseph can see you guys, so maybe it'd be good to introduce yourself.
okay, we'll do that.
I'm Brady George. I'm the fire chief here in the county, district. So,
I'm Kurt Webb. I'm the county executive deputy executive.
There you go.
My name is Jim Bolster. I'm just an interested observer.
Okay, thanks. And Joseph, do you want to tell us who you're representing?
Yes, so I'm Joseph Anderson with Division of Forestry, Fire, and State Land, and I've been tasked with implementing House Bill 48 throughout the state.
You're a very popular man right now. Sorry.
It's kept my phone busy.
I bet. Okay, we'll introduce ourselves too so that you know who we are.
So I'm Councilman Mark Hurd.
And Councilman Dave Erickson.
And I'm Councilmember Sandy Goodlander.
And I'm Nolan Gunnell, Councilman.
And we have our policy analyst, Andrew Erickson, with us too. So feel free to interrupt at any time. Joseph, if you have something you want to add, we'd be happy to hear from you. And I'm sure we'll have questions for you. I'm going to start by turning time over to Dallin to kind of give us an overview.
okay, Mike.
Yeah, please.
So actually, I think I'm wondering if Joseph might provide an overview. I mean, basically, House Bill 48, and correct me if I'm wrong, Joseph, is an attempt to improve our WUI, or our wildland urban interface, fire response and outcomes for property owners, as well as, there's some minor insurance implications, but really I think Joseph's probably the best one to really introduce it, and I can fill in on local, how it applies locally a little bit for
Okay.
sure. So.
Okay, that'd be great. Is that okay with you, Joseph?
Yeah, absolutely. And if some of you have been to some of the public meeting presentations or seen those virtually, this will be a little bit of a repeat. But let me break it down. The state spends tens of millions of dollars every year fighting wildfires across Utah. Most of that is spent protecting homes and structures within the high-risk wildland urban interface. One of the intents of this bill is to educate the public that live within those areas on how they can better protect their homes so that when that wildfire comes through, their structure is still standing at the end of it. That's really one of the main intents of this. And what the bill does, multiple things. But the primary portion is it asks that the Division of Forestry, Fire, and State Lands creates a high-risk wildland urban interface boundary. And any homes, any properties within that boundary line will be assessed a fee. And the only intended fee is to cover the cost of lot assessments for certified assessors to come onto the property when requested and instruct the homeowner on what they can do individually to better protect their property from the threat of wildfire. There's a couple other elements to the bill that are a little more minor. One of it impacts insurance. As we know, homeowners insurance has been a serious issue in the high-risk wildfire areas. And insurers use a million different ways to assess that wildfire risk and label something as high-risk WUI. And one of the results of that is you have properties in downtown St. George that are being called high-risk WUI and their insurance dropping. In order to better protect consumers, the intent of this bill was to have every insurer, when they're labeling something high-risk WUI, use the same menu. And so for that high-risk wildland urban interface map that the division is creating, the insurers are required to use that and basically pull back their classification to that line, and only things within that line can they call high-risk buoy. That's the only criteria it enforces on insurance companies. They can still use all the other data to assess risk, of course. If they label something as high-risk wildland urban interface, they have to keep it within the boundary lines, a much tighter boundary line that the state's creating. Additionally, this bill requires municipalities to adopt and enforce the WUI code. Counties were already required to as participants in the cooperative wildfire system. This just adds municipalities to that requirement if they're participating in the program. And that basically kind of sums up the program. And I'm sure you're going to have a million questions. These are the most common questions. So with the fees that are assessed to homeowners, the state is the one who sets that fee rate, and the bill requires us to do it per square footage. Now, we know that's not ideal for most counties in the state, and that would be a welcome change if you get new legislation that would fix that. But the way it's written right now is it says that these fees have to be assessed by square footage. And as we're setting the rates, the state has to look at what the costs are that go into that, both the cost of the county and the cost of the state in implementing the program. In the beginning, we're not going to know those, right? It's just guesswork. So until we have a couple of years under our belt, we're doing a very low flat rate fee for properties in that area. And then starting in 2028, once we have an idea of what the costs are, both to the county and the state, then we can adjust those fees accordingly, whether that's up or down. We won't know until we have the final cost. So for the first 2 years, the flat rate fees are going to be between $20 and $100 per structure, based on square footage. So a smaller home could be the $20, the largest home would be $100. So it's a very minimal fee, and it's really meant to cover just kind of whatever the startup costs are of this. And then we can move forward to determining what those final costs are. So what questions do you have that I didn't cover?
One question that I had, you said the fee will be set per square foot. Is that per square foot of the property or the home?
Of the structure itself.
Of the structure,
Yeah.
okay.
And the bill is written specifically to say that this is a fee and not a tax, and so it's collected by the county. So we give you the information of what those fees are, and then you have the property information to be able to look at, okay, this home is 3,500 square foot, so it's going to be this fee, and then you see that notice the property owner collect that fee. That fee is then transmitted back to the state. The county and the state will have an agreement. If you would like to keep a portion of those fees to cover your costs, you can. So we'll have an agreement that outlines what portion of the fees that you desire to keep, and so then we'll return whatever that is to you to cover, make sure your costs are covered in this.
So the state is gonna send us a list of the homes that need to be assessed a fee. Like, we don't have to go out and make those assessments as a county? Is that correct? Is that what I'm hearing?
We will provide the boundary map showing what the line on the ground is, and then working with your, property assessment folks or GIS folks, whoever you determine is the best fit for that. Then we'll give you that map, and then you'll tell us, well, you don't even tell us. You'll have the properties on the map within that line that will be assessed a fee. Because we don't have individual property data within the division. We don't keep that record. That's at the county level.
Okay.
So the county does the collection of the fees. So
Yes, the county does the collection, yeah.
So,
We
so
set the
we'll
rate,
be,
the
so
county
we'll be
collects.
blamed for the whole thing, right?
Say that again.
So we'll be blamed for the whole thing, because we collect the fees, and then we send we send the fees to the state, right?
Yeah, the hope is that we can educate the public enough to where they understand where this is originating. I mean, ultimately, it's originating with the state legislature, implemented through the division, and the county is just the middleman, essentially, collecting the fee. So what we'd like to do is partner with you on sending out notices to the public, so before they get that fee, they understand where it's coming from.
Okay, I have two questions.
They'll still blame us.
So I'm not sure of what you described of insurance on the property as this gets defined in those locations of risk on the homeowner's insurance. Plus, in our county, we have some remote cabins that are up by Hardware Ranch, and they are on private property, so they have restricted us from going on and seeing their cabins, if you call it that, so we don't have an idea of square footage on many of those places. So how do we answer that as far as a fee goes? You got any guidelines for that?
Oh, that's a fascinating case. I don't have an answer. We'd have to workshop that. I haven't encountered that before. We will find a solution. We'll work with you to find a solution.
Because I would suspect we're dealing with hundreds of cabins up there.
Yeah, we'll have to work with you on that.
Are they not, they're not taxed based on they're not already currently taxed based on their?
Well, they're in the FR 40, they're taxed, but
Some.
I've had so many people calling me this past week because we shut down road because of weather, so they're complaining. So we've actually had some assessors go up there, appraisers, and not get in because it's private property. So you can look on Google Earth and see what's there, and I asked our assessor to do that last week, and it's like, well, here's a cabin, it's 10 acres, but we can see it's on stilts or it's this, but we don't have a square footage on there because we're not allowed to go in there because it's private property.
So, and Joseph, like, catch me if I say something wrong, but part of the high, so the fees will only apply to the high-risk buoy that's based off the map the state creates, right?
Correct.
Part of that is a density, how close these structures are to each other. And the FR 40 does a lot to separate those buildings from one another, right?
But trees are as burnable as a cabin
Yeah,
is.
but this is about structures, this isn't about trees, right? So what we're worried about is structure-to-structure fires, right? So what I'm saying is there's areas in Scare Canyon, and Flat area that won't be as impacted as you think by this, because they only have one cabin per 40 acres. So as firefighters, we can deal with one structure easily, right? 5 structures is a whole nother deal, and that's where the density component.
But that still doesn't make sense, because the fire department can get to a structure here in the valley pretty quickly, but up there, no.
But what I'm saying is the fees and so the answer to your question is that some of those cabins that you can't get to assess.
No, you can't get the fire department there, so it's gonna burn and go quicker than others here in the valley that the fire department can get to.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, and you're right, like that response times. Go ahead, Joseph. Or,
So House Bill 48 is dealing with the high-risk wildlife urban interface and where fees will be assessed. It doesn't address, suppression response. This is really public education. And Alan's right, because the map isn't finished, I can't tell you if those specific structures are within it, but there is a density factor. So it's not just where there's risk. We can look at where there's risk right now, but how close are the structures together? So the way the map currently is, if you have to have at least 2 structures within 250 meters, you can roughly translate that to yards, in order to qualify to be in that high-risk wildland urban interface. So wildland urban interface has a density portion, which is different than just, there's wildfire risk, which is vegetation. So that map, if those structures are far away from each other, more than 250 meters, they're not going to show up on the map, so they won't be fees, and so it doesn't have anything to do with what we're talking about during this discussion. That doesn't mean they're not at risk. They can still very much be at risk. They're just not going to be within the boundary line of the map due to the density.
Back to your point, as far as 40 acres, it is FR 40, but there's been subdivisions that have been platted and approved there, so they're less than 40 acres on the cabins?
yeah, so there will be some areas that are impacted, but not everybody up there will be.
So if they pulled permit to build in those areas and haven't built on past that, we should at least have a floor plan that showed what the original
Unless they didn't,
structure was in that area,
unless they didn't pull a permit.
if it's permitted.
That's what we're worried about. I want to welcome Casey Snyder. Representative Snyder is joining us online, and I think he's actually coming. Oh, no, he's on, he's just on. Okay. Welcome, Casey, and we'll invite you to join in anything that you want to add, if you feel like you want to add, or if somebody has any questions for you. We've got Joseph Anderson from the state here, and Dallin. Yes. Okay, so.
Thanks. Yeah, and I'll jump in as you want me to, and as it becomes appropriate. I apologize for not being in there in person. I got sucked down to the Capitol this morning for meetings. We have a special session coming up next week that we're trying to prep for. So I apologize for not being there in person, but I can definitely chime in at any point that you'd like me to.
Perfect, thank you. We know you're busy. Okay, so the state is gonna send us a map. And on my little outline that I have, it says that Cache County already meets the requirement of adopting the WUI code, but do we have that map yet? We have the map.
We have a map that we established when we adopted the code. There will most likely be misalignment between our map and the state's map, so at some point, we will want to go back and set our boundary at that, but we'll have to have those areas that already fall outside of that area grandfathered, so we'll have to identify that on the map moving forward, so that we'll know what areas that we need to work with the homeowners to try to create improvements within that, because they will have built under our map, not the new map, and so that's where that disconnect will occur.
And we have to have this done by January 1st? Is
So our
that?
map has been in place for several years now.
Okay, so we're okay as a county. Okay. All right.
And allow me to clarify on the mapping too, because this is a point of confusion for many people. There are two different maps we're talking about here. There's the high-risk map that the state's developing, where the fee is going to be assessed. And then there's the local WUI map, where the county will enforce the WUI code. That local map, you draw independently, so they're totally separate. You draw that independently, and you determine, like, that's gonna be much broader than the high-risk map, much bigger, and it's gonna incorporate all the areas of potential future development. So when somebody does buy empty land, they wanna put a house on it, you wanna make sure that that's in a wildfire-prone area, you wanna make sure that they will abide by the WUI building code. And so your map's gonna encompass all of those areas. Whereas the high-risk map is only looking at where structures are currently on the ground and we say high risk, but really it's extreme risk. So there's your normal wildfire risk that you're addressing at the local level through adopting the WUI code. And then there's the extreme risk that we're looking at with this mapping that has the density factor. So they're two different maps.
And one piece to add in there too, for purposes of the fee, the only lots assessed the fee are in the state's high-risk area, not in the county's area. So, and the city goes through the same process, but for the purposes of the state, on the existing map, it's generally those areas highlighted in red. That's the thing that is the areas and the properties that are gonna have the fee assessed.
I got one question on like some commercial places.
They follow the same fee structure consistent with the state map, because it's not residential versus commercial, it's structure-based, if that makes sense.
I just asking, like, for example, up Beaver Mountain, Cherry Peak, things like that you can get a quite volume of people in those areas, yet one or two structures, then I think, I would dare say that we don't have a tremendous amount of WUI areas, right, high risk. Just kind of little spots and stuff versus up like Logan Canyon, you might have a few where there's some density.
Yeah, we're still waiting on the state that
Yeah.
extreme risk WUI map, but just from our WUI, so anywhere wildland fuels, so whether that be grass, brush, or timber, interact with man-made structures is the WUI, right?
Yeah.
So when you think of like Logan Canyon or Ant Flat area with Scare Canyon, Hardware Estates, Beaver Mountain,
Some of those.
like that's WUI, right? And to kind of circle around, there are risks to individual structures and like response time's part of that. And I think a big part of this though is like you think of fires that, I mean, California's a terrible example, but like an example, right, where you have multiple structures being impacted and overwhelmed because there's too much brush, the structures are too close together, all that is what makes it a really bad situation. As far as that goes, Cache County doesn't have a lot of that because their structures are spread out. And when we are there, when firefighting resources are there, we can deal with 1 or 2 structures at a time, right, rather than 20 or 50 or 100. So Cache County, as far as extreme risk WUI, doesn't have a lot. Now, that's not to say that none of it will show up as that, but yeah, there's not a lot.
Yeah, I think there's a few other counties, as I'm sitting there kind of thinking in my head, I'm thinking of an area maybe like Wasatch County,
Okay.
Timber Lakes up in there, which has actually fire hydrants and, a whole system, but yet they are packed in there with cabins and homes and, up in that high mountain area. And so I would dare say that might be a high risk area. But I'm thinking around here, I think we're not too much.
No, not a lot. I think the way to view this is kind of values at risk. How many, like what values there are and how close they are together. Like,
yeah.
And so like there might be a couple that built their cabins close together on corners of the 40 acres or FR40 or those ones that got subdivided, right? They might fall into it while their neighbors aren't because they're further away. So.
Okay, now it's.
Well,
go ahead, Casey.
and one thing maybe if I can add to that too, can you guys hear me okay? There's a little feedback on my end.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, you're good.
So one of the things that's also important to note on this, so the WUI map, the high risk map that's established by the state is as much for the county, but I'd say as it is really for the homeowner. We have homeowners losing coverage or having their rates go through the roof because insurance companies are saying, well, you're in the WUI, we can no longer cover you, or we won't, or you have to pay for it. And the data they were using was so atrocious that we forced them through this bill to use our map because we have the highest degree of confidence in that. So so now the statute says to the insurance market, this is our WUI map, this is what WUI means, and so it really actually what it did is there was about 220,000 structures in the initial WUI maps that insurance was using. Post the passage of this bill, it moved it down to about 70,000 structures. So we pulled the majority of Utahns who were getting sort of ripped off by insurance markets out of that structure and said, okay, these are the ones that are there. But with the fee and how this is all structured, if a homeowner is in the WUI, under existing market rules, they have no recourse to bring their premiums down or to protect their property. Under what we're talking here now is if somebody is in the WUI and they coordinate with you all and they do all the tasks to make their home fire safe, at the parcel level, they can go back in and have their home certified as low risk for fire now, post all of mitigation, which means that now their home is listed as wildfire safe, and then that data goes back to the insurance market and hopefully that gives them a reduction in premium because they're no longer able to be classified as high risk. So that's sort of the other piece of this as you guys are doing some of the brainstorming on how this is going to be implemented in the county.
Okay, so these assessments, if I remember right, we learned a little bit about this down at USAC, and those assessments as they come in say, well, okay, if you were to do this, and this, then you will actually mitigate and lower the risk quite a bit. And that's what you're saying, Casey, that then that can be used to go back to insurance companies and say, hey, we did these things and our risk has been lowered, will insurance come down?
Yep, and my intention at that point is if you have done the action, you can roll yourself out of the fee assessment area and are no longer assessed the $50 fee. That's my long-term goal on this, so that we're incentivizing people to work through this and improve. Because what that'll do, yeah, they get their individual bump and savings within their insurance bill, but if all of the structures that are in the high-risk WUI to implement sort of this life and property savings protocols, we reduce the overall cost of catastrophic fire to the state and the risk of it moving outside of high risk into sort of the moderate risk areas. So we're actually doing fire mitigation by getting ahead of it on the front edge of the most fire prone areas.
I got one more question is, how does this affect, for example, are we addressing these assessments? Sometimes it's outside of your scope. It's outside of what you can do on your property, that maybe the biggest hazard comes from the Forest Service next to you. That they're not making it very, they're not doing anything to reduce the fuel load in any way. And so no matter what you do, you still might have that huge risk just being neighbors to public land.
And that's a valid point. We can't require the federal government to do anything different. But when the homeowner takes these actions as recommended law assessments, if that fire does come through on the federal land and goes to the private property, it's much less likely that it will impact that private property if that homeowner has done the work. Their structure is much more likely to survive through that if they do the work recommended in the law assessment. So it's really saving the private landowners. Although we wish we could mandate the federal government to do, what they need to do, the goal is to protect the landowners in Utah here.
Okay, I have a couple questions. So the assessments of these properties to see what if somebody's gonna have to go out and say, here are the 4 things you need to do to lower your risk, and then someone will have to go back and say, okay, you did them. Those are 2 visits that I see. Is the state going to help with any of that, or is that completely on the county and on our fire department or our assessor's department?
So, and then I'll let the other guys jump in on this one too. So the primary responsibility for all home assessments lies at the state. Yeah. So the state of Utah is responsible per statute for all of this. However, so you guys have the cost share agreements with the states that you have to do every year a certain amount of work to be covered by the state's fire insurance if you have a wildfire. If you want to, you can go ahead and do these assessments if you want to. Again, it's totally voluntarily, and the time and resources put into those assessments can count towards your annual match contribution for the fire mitigation requirements. So it's totally voluntary on your end. Ultimately, the responsibility is with the state, but if you want to get ahead of this and you want to use it as your match, we've made that as an option available to folks.
Okay, and then my second question is, what about a timeline for sending out notices to people about this fee, like getting it on an actual tax notice so that we can collect it, because we have to collect it in 2026, correct?
Yeah, it'll go on as just it's required statutorily to go on the tax bill moving into next year's tax bill. So there's still some rulemaking. Joseph, if you want to jump in on this part, we're still working through the protocols. I think there's 18 months, 24 months before you guys are going to start really having all this lined up.
Yeah, 24 months. So between now and when you guys, as the county, are going to send out tax notices, we'll work with you on the language so that we can clarify for homeowners who are getting this fee, why the fee is on their bill, and what to do moving forward as far as requesting a lot assessment. So we'll work with you on that. You tell us when you send those out, and we'll make sure that we're partnering to get everything done in time for you. As to the Lot assessments, I want to go back, you mentioned timeframes on lot assessments. So we're currently developing the certification criteria and lot assessment criteria. And so we expect to have that ready in the spring. Realistically, we wouldn't be doing this in the winter anyway because you can't do vegetation when it's under snowpack. So once the snow clears in the spring, we can start doing these lot assessments, and by then we'll have the criteria outlined. That way they're done the same way statewide. And we'll have a software program that this data will be entered into. And one of the features that we're looking for as we build that software platform is that homeowners can self-certify when they do work. So it won't require a follow-up visit individually. They can just upload pictures and say, hey, my lot assessment told me to do this, I've done it, here's the pictures. And then we can review that and say, yep, you're good to go, and we can change that classification level for them. So we're trying to make sure that we can do this as efficient as possible and as quickly as possible, given the limited manpower. And like Representative Snyder said, it is the responsibility of the Division of Forestry, Fire, and State Lands to do these. And we would love to partner with you on that if you have capacity under your CWS obligation.
So question, can you give an example of what a lot assessment would be? As part of that, looking at the material the house was built, and they'd have to change the outside of their house and incur quite a bit of expense, or how does that sit? Do you have an example of that?
I do. So the lot assessments are looking at two different things. And they're looking at the vegetation surrounding the property and the home construction materials. And this is outlined in the WUI code that the county has adopted. And we have to abide by those same WUI code criteria when we're assigning that triage level, high, medium, low, according to the work they've done around their property. When it comes to vegetation, you want to make sure there's pretty much no vegetation next to the house, as we don't want embers falling in that, catching that vegetation on fire, which would then catch the structure on fire. And then out to about 30 feet, we want to make sure the vegetation is, spaced out, it's not too high, there's no ladder fuels that allow it to go from the ground up into the treetops. And then after 150 feet, you can have, some taller trees and whatnot, and a little less restrictive on the density. And that's all outlined in the WUI code. And we'll explain that to each homeowner as we go through the assessments. The software platform that we'll be using, we'll go step by step through that, looking at each zone around the house and what the vegetation requirements are, how that changes when there's a slope on the property. And when it comes to the home materials, we're looking at the roof, of course, that's a huge one, the siding, any decking around the property, what the eaves are like as far as grading and protection under there, gutters, things like that. This fee, again, is not punitive. It's not meant to really motivate someone to make these changes. This is an education campaign to tell them that, hey, if you want to better protect your property, and if you show your insurance company you're doing all you can, you could, if you got a cedar shake roof, yes, replace that with an asphalt or metal one, absolutely. But it's really education.
And maybe to double up on that fees, the fee is going to be an average per structure of about $50, or parcel about $50 is what we are looking for. And that's just to cover the cost of doing all the software and having the assessments done. So it's a nominal fee that can actually be eliminated if people do the work.
And to that too, where Cache County has already has adopted the WUI code and been enforcing it, that type of thing should be fairly minimal, where there's drastic changes that need to be done, because they shouldn't be building with wood shingles and other things under our WUI code currently. So if they got permitted and got inspected and everything, right, that's kind of a caveat. But if they've done that, there shouldn't be huge changes to their structures that would be required.
I got one question. Will grazing be an allowed or an approved improvement to mitigate and bring forage down?
So the lot assessments don't require any methodology as far as improving the property. It just has certain vegetation requirements. So if they want to use grazing or they want to bring in a crew, we don't specify that.
That might help a lot of these areas that, you know, that they've been kind of unfriendly to cattle in their areas. They may say, hey, let's open them up and let's get this understory out of here. You know, let's get it grazed off, limited. It would help.
Okay, what other questions does anybody have? I might have a few questions for our local fire department on just how, and I want to make sure, and I'm sorry if I'm confusing because I get confused. The state has not put out their map yet to us, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, and
The final map, but I do think, talking to Jamie, there is a URAP map that exists right now, and the final map will be fairly close to that.
What's URAP?
I don't remember what the acronym is.
So it's a public vehicle mapping system that anybody can look at, and on that map, there's a layer that says structure exposure score, and that goes from a scale of 1 to 10. What that means is if a wildfire occurred in that location, here's the risk to a potential structure, if there was a structure there. So that's a good starting point if you're trying to understand wildfire risk, but that doesn't take into account where structures actually are or the density. So that won't actually tell you what that new map is going to look like, because the new map does take into account where structures actually are. We do have a draft of that right now that we're working through a couple of tweaks of that. So we will have that done here within the next couple of weeks to share with you.
Okay. All right, you know what, I really appreciate you all being here, because the little bit that we had heard, just the little bit of information made it sound like it was going to be a real overreach by the state, and that the counties were going to be costing a lot of money. And I feel a little more comfortable that this is going to save our homeowners money on their insurance and help us to be in a better place if there is a fire. And so
I think there's some counties that are way behind in even looking at some of these things. But I know we've been talking about wildland urban interface for years, you know, and I know Chief Hammer jumped on a lot of that and was pulling all of it. So I feel really good with what you guys have said and everything that you know, Chief George, I think basically we can just keep going rather than have to, you know, start from scratch. So.
And I'm really glad that the state's going to help come out and do those assessments. I worried about that. Our assessors are so they're not overworked, but they're overwhelmed sometimes with all the assessments that they need to do. So, so I think that help from the state will go a long way. I don't know.
When the map is available, what's the next step?
Yes.
So, go ahead, Joseph.
When we have the map, then we will share it with you, and I'll work with your local team there to make sure we can work with you to integrate it into your system and then identify which structures, which properties are within that boundary line.
And then does the council have to sign off or accept those findings, or what is the role with the council going forward?
The bill doesn't specify. I'm not aware of any requirement there.
Okay, great.
Okay. So we don't have to approve anything, the map or anything. It just comes to us. And
I think that it would be great at that point to meet with Chief George and whoever else that we can grasp it and say, hey, let's look at it together, and even the fire district, maybe let's look at it and make sure that we're all on the same page.
Odds are our map is more restricted to start with.
That's what I'm.
Sounds like it.
That's what I'm thinking.
That code. The only areas that there might be concern is structures that towns seeing their map and overlaying it on ours with the GIS data would allow us to then work with specific property owners to help with that education process.
So does the map come to you and then you share it with the council, or who gets the map?
The state.
This,
Yeah, these guys would get it.
Joseph, once the high extreme risk buoy map is done, or the high risk buoy map, that'll be on URAP as well, publicly available?
Yes.
Okay.
It'll be publicly available on URAP, yes.
So it'll be our GIS department that'll have to help.
So I think it would be great if we had, once that's in place, once the structures have been identified and confirmed on the Cache County level, if we just had a spot on our agenda for a 5-minute overview of, hey, you know, here's the update, here's the plan, here's how things are moving. That's,
Yeah, once that comes
I
out.
think that sounds sufficient to me.
Identify that specifically within our structure map, so we'll have that layer. One question I have, Joseph, how often is the state gonna review that map and update it so that, because density's gonna change over time?
Yeah.
And so, just curious as to what that revision cycle is.
Yes, the revision cycle is annual, so each year we will update it and add in all the new development that's occurred. Also look at any fires that have occurred since the previous cycle and map those as well, because that's gonna change the risk if there's a fire going through that area. So yes, each year.
Thank you.
Okay, and then the actual process to get information to our treasurer, who will have to add that onto the tax notices. Like that could be a little bit of a, have you guys got a plan for that, or is that something we're just deal with as we get that information?
I think the mechanics of that will be fairly easy, because it's just a line item.
Okay.
It will be its own line item of the.
Just on specific homeowners?
fees.
For the impacted
Okay.
property owners.
Of, yeah.
It won't be that big of a
That's what I
deal.
understood from what they said before.
And the burden comes back to the county, I believe, in figuring out that square footage to
Yeah.
know which fee level they're at.
Yeah.
Okay,
Some of them may say,
I want-
woo-wee.
Yeah, they might.
If I want to go back to something, if I could, what the Joseph said, just to reiterate the significance of that update. So, a real life example why that's important. So Monroe Mountain just had that significant fire, one of the largest in state's history. Most of that mountain is burned over, some structures included, but places that would have been high risk are likely to not be at risk for the foreseeable future based on the fire behavior that occurred in that fire. So this being a living document that's updated fairly often is actually gonna help people as they move through this. I believe that most of Monroe Mountain will probably be low risk of fire based on
There's
the
nothing
fires coming through. So we're trying to not penalize people unfairly who legitimately are not the WUI. So just something to add to.
okay. Does anyone else have any other questions? Do any of you have questions for us or for Joseph or Casey? Anybody in the that's here from the public? Is there something that you have a question about or that we could answer for you? Okay, all right. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Unless,
Very informative.
yeah, I feel so much better about this. I thought it was a big worry, and now I feel like we can handle it, and it's not so much to worry about. So, thank you for joining us, Joseph and Casey, and we will be in touch if we have any other questions.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. All right. I think we're in good shape, especially the fact that we already have a map of sorts and we've adopted the WUI code. So I didn't realize even that. Like when I was at USAC, there were things said that I thought, oh my word, we have to have all this by January 1st. We're in trouble.
I remember that now, our wildlands is, our WUI map is, I think it's been about 6 years, 7 years, could that be?
So I think the code that's in place is the 2006 code.
Yeah,
And so
but I
that's
remember,
when there's.
I remember they
We
redid a bunch of things on our map, I thought about, could have been, I know, I remember the fire board talking about it, going through it, and they did some rework on it at that time, and I remember some of the concerns that they shared even with the, at that time, Chief Hammer talked about that we don't know all the structures that are in these areas. And we're hoping to get those, somehow we gotta find those structures.
I do have one question. So if we assign an area WUI high risk, citizens has paid their fee, but they take no extra amount to do their lot assessment, so the risk still remains high. Does the bill say that that risk stays with that citizen for not doing that, rather than the county providing up more fire control, more closeness and everything else? Does that make sense?
Yes, I think where the fee is actually assessed on an annual basis, that they would continue to stay at that highest rate.
And so they're accepting that they acknowledge their risk and they haven't changed it, so they can't come back and say, well, the county knew it, so they should have had better fire fighting capabilities.
That's a good question right there. I think it will be in the messaging of how that announcement is sent out, and kind of the education piece of that they're acknowledging by not taking actions to reduce their own risk, that they are incurring that.
I hope it sits on the citizen rather than saying the government entity didn't step up their firefighting capabilities, so.
I think the other part of it is right now, I think a lot of people are fixated on that very low amount, which is good to start the process off to gather information. But those individuals, after those first couple of years at that low rate, if suddenly that rate jumps, because now we have enough data in the system to say, this is what the actual cost is of managing fires with a high risk that way, that will prompt action. For a few, probably still won't guarantee everybody, but it'll prompt action with quite a few to start mitigating some of that risk.
Yeah, at $50 a year, there'd be a lot of people that just say,
What about,
yeah, I'll just pay that.
especially if you gotta change your roof from
Yeah.
Cedar Shakes.
Or something expensive.
Yeah, it's suddenly if it jumps to, several $100s or, $1,000 or something, which we don't know yet, that people can start to calculate that out, say, okay, now, here's the cost of a roof, here's the cost over the same amount of time, I'm gonna pay more if I do nothing than if I actually make the change.
And potentially the cost of insurance or even keeping insurance could play into that.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Any other questions?
That just seems not a question, just a statement. We're talking structure, but Representative Snyder talked about the Monroe fire. I think about the Duck Creek fire. All of that fire happened because of fuel, which was different than structure. The fuel took part of the structure, so, and that's why I lean towards, if you look at Hardware in the Ant Flat Road area, there's a lot of fuel up there. So even if I'm 250 meters away from another structure, it's probably gonna go just as fast as if there was another structure there, because I have fuel there, whether that's sagebrush, trees, grass, whatever.
And that's where the state's cooperative wildfire system and the participation commitment comes in with mitigation work. Like having fuels crews out there, reducing those fuels. There's projects going on in the county there. We just cleaned up, well, we still have to burn the piles, but Scare Canyon has had a lot of fuels removed, as well as around Beaver Mountain. But you're right, like that, there's kind of like the fuels and then the structures, which turn into fuels.
Well, you bring up a good point, because isn't Scare Canyon most private property?
Mhm.
So yet the state has to go in there and take care of that private property fuel, or how do you make that happen? Does that make sense?
Through grants, we identify it as a high level area that needs that help and then apply for grants and let those grants pay for that to help the citizens, because the state wants to help the citizens, especially when it's bigger areas where they can't do
It's
this.
more than, it better be matching, right? They better have some skin in the game.
Depends on which grant it is, for sure. Some of them are that way, matching, and some are direct. Okay, and then these gentlemen help us with that by working through the CWS program, so it identifies that the county is taking part in it to make that risk lower also.
Some of those opportunities that are available to us as a county, that we can send resources out to assist with that, and it will actually reduce our overall burden on our CWS agreements. So rather than us having to come up with, I think our current one's like $83,000 a year for 2026, that if we can send resources out and do that,
that match.
Rather than just having to write a check for that.
Oh, good. Yeah, I wondered, I wrote that down, what was our mitigation match, so.
And maybe just an obscure point of view to your points of all the fuel that's out in the forest grounds or even on private, and thinking about, I think you mentioned Duck Creek or
Monroe.
those fires, if they're human cause and they come off of private onto public lands of any sort, well, if those private citizens are doing their work, there's less likelihood for that to go onto the public lands and cause a bigger fuel call for the state. The less fire-prone areas, the better overall.
Interesting.
So one of my biggest concerns is the public lands, our Forest Service. It needs to be thinned. We've got to get rid of some fuel.
I know the Forest Service has done a couple burns.
I know,
recently.
a couple doesn't even scratch it.
Right.
But it needs to be thinned.
And that's that's kind of legislative level, and they're looking
I know.
at it pretty closely right now.
More than they have in years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey,
So,
oh, you're fine.
Put in a plug for the local Forest Service guys, like they filled some positions that haven't been filled for years, and are starting to pick up more local. I mean, it takes them a long time to get all the piles of mountains of paperwork done, but the local guys are trying.
that's great. Dylan, you a local boy?
I am. I was in welding and small
Okay,
engines.
I was gonna say, I keep looking at you and I go, Dylan, I know you.
Be scared.
Did I ever follow
Hey,
that?
stay after and tell us all his teaching methods.
I was gonna
I don't
say,
have my earbuds in, and my phone's not out in the shop, so.
okay, I'm sitting there going, man, I'm having some, I've tried to forget some things, but you weren't one of them. It just left me, okay?
If you really remembered me, that would have been bad.
Yeah, if we were all judged by our high school days, that would be horrible.
That's the bad part about staying.
Dave doesn't remember
Yeah.
when I was in high school either.
Sister?
Sister and a brother. So Cannon was my brother,
Okay,
then Bailey.
okay.
She might have done.
There's it must be the other Vedrero, there's another
There's a
Vedrero
bunch
family.
around.
There's a daughter, a sister there, yeah, I guess cousin maybe or something that,
So I didn't, but there was, at Skyview, there was, Shay Woodrow, I think was close.
okay.
But yeah, same family, too far apart to be cousins, I don't really know, so.
Okay.
All right, just stay in touch with us, and I feel like the treasurer should have been here, and the assessor. I probably should have invited them, because they're gonna play a part in all of this. And so, as you get maps and information, let's just keep the communication
When we
open.
have the full understanding what we would be asking them to do, I think that's
Yeah.
great timing.
Yeah,
I worry about just the information that they will have versus the information of the reality of what it is. That's, changes or illegal building or, which it might help us in the long run too, get some things corrected.
Well, another, I mean, to borrow Tracy's phrase, obscure viewpoint, like for those, like for the suppression side, firefighter side, in the long run, to go into an area with structures and them having done this work and not have wood shingles, like the reduced stress, manpower needed to protect them, like the outcomes will be much better. Firefighter safety will be improved.
And then through the assessments, us knowing what's out there too, because sometimes we pull into some areas, we're not quite sure what's going on there.
We were on a ride, we were on a ranger ride here a little bit ago, and they pointed to that, there was, one of the cabins up there that had been burned right to the ground. And then it built back up. Not a single plan, not a single anything was ever submitted to the county.
It could give the county an opportunity to actually gather some of that data, because if you set all the fees at the highest for those that you don't have that amount on, but create an opportunity for them to correct it downward, that may be an opportunity to gather that data on the square footage.
Terrific.
thank you for Andrew, on number 7 on the agenda, there's no place listed for the ARPA survey results.
Take care, Dylan.
I believe that would be put as part of the budget.
It's gonna just be part of the budget.
I believe so.
Do we not want Alma to, because that's the CDBG grant, that has nothing to do with our budget, that's just people who are gonna apply for those grants.
I was gonna say, that's what Alma told me to have it as, so.
Okay, is he gonna give the results, or is he just like, I don't think this has anything to do with the budget,
He said that Matt would be presenting it.
but Matt would.
If you would like it as a separate agenda item, that can be done.
Well, it's during the public hearing,
Would you like it under other business?
I don't know, what do you guys think? This survey that Alma did,
Yeah.
it's listed as 7B2, but we don't have it in here. We've got the treasurer correction, the budget, and then the budget opening. And so I don't know that survey result has anything to do with,
That's what I was told.
okay, I just, let me work through that. Where should we have it on the agenda? To me, it's just good information. Alma's gonna say, here is the results of the survey.
You could do 6, I think it's D, it should be available under items of special interest.
I think that would make more sense.
Okay.
And just, because we are not gonna apply for these grants, they're gonna be, like, the senior center's gonna apply for one, the fire department will do one, the election center, they can apply for them, but
Yeah, but this is our support.
this is our support,
Support for it.
yeah.
I just kind of feel a little bit like, so we talked about it and all of a sudden there's a great big withdrawal. It's kind of weird.
Yeah, so, let's do that, let's move that to 6D.
Okay, someone will need to make a motion during the regular meeting for it, but, Sandy, someone still needs to adjourn the meeting.
Oh, okay, can I get a
So
motion to
moved.
adjourn?
Second.
Second meeting adjourned.
Don't have to encourage me to adjourn a
Sorry.
meeting.
Thanks, Andrew.